Hello, I'm John Fuller. We're continuing our discussion of the U.S. criminal court system, specifically our book, American Criminal Courts, Legal Process and Social Context. Today we're going to talk about the juvenile court. The juvenile court is different from the adult court. It's different in the way it operates, it's different in its philosophy, and it is definitely different in the outcomes afforded to defendants. The juvenile court is based upon the idea that juveniles do not have the full mental capability to truly appreciate the crimes that they have committed. And so they must be dealt with in a very different manner than the adult criminal court. Remember, in the criminal trial process, we talked about the various rationales used for sentencing, and we contrasted rehabilitation with retribution and deterrence. Well, in the juvenile court, the idea is rehabilitation, rehabilitation, rehabilitation. The philosophy is that any youth can be redeemed, and that by addressing the underlying conditions that got that young person in trouble, that person can be treated and become a productive member of society and not have to be dealt with by the adult criminal court. Now, this philosophy of rehabilitation comes at a price for the juvenile, and that price is the idea of due process, where in the adult system, due process is absolutely essential because a lot of very negative things can happen to a defendant. That person can be sent to prison, they can be put on probation, parole with all kinds of conditions placed upon them. In capital cases, they can even be put to death. So the idea in the adult criminal justice system is to have an adversarial process where the defendant, the defense attorney, and the prosecutor plead their cases to determine guilt or innocence. In the juvenile court, it's not quite like that. Here, the prosecutor and the defense attorney are not so concerned about guilt or innocence of the young person, but they are more concerned with rehabilitating that person. So the philosophy is a person who does not face the dangers of long-term incarceration or the death penalty really doesn't need the due process rights that the adults do in the adult criminal justice system. This is a very controversial issue because whether you call it punishment or treatment, to the youth, it really looks pretty much like the same thing. If you are being treated but you're being held in a secure detention facility while you go through your treatment and you cannot do the normal things that you would like to do as a child, it's hard to think of that as treatment and not as punishment. So there's this whole philosophy that on one hand sounds very good, but in real practice, to many juvenile offenders, there is no difference between the juvenile system and the adult system, except you don't get the due process rights that the adults are entitled to. Another thing that happens with the juvenile court is an issue we call net widening. And here the idea is that the juvenile court has had a tendency to expand the net of social control. So rather than dealing with people who are really serious criminals, okay, they branch out and deal with people who have the potential to become serious criminals or who commit very minor crimes that in the adult system would be let go. But because of the philosophy of rehabilitation in the juvenile system, what we try to do is deal with those people very, very early in their career. And so this is especially true when we look at status offenses, offenses that people commit that would not be offenses if they were adults. Drinking underage, running away from home, being incorrigible. These are all extra laws that juveniles are subjected to that adults are not. And again, the reasoning behind this is that we are trying to do good things for the juveniles, not deprive them of their freedom. So there is this real trade-off between due process and rehabilitation. And there's a lot of controversy as to whether we've really struck the appropriate balance. Over the past couple of decades, we've seen more due process entered into the juvenile justice system precisely because of this tension between due process and rehabilitation. Thank you.